All right. Looks like the numbers seems to have settled down. So let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, every one of you, for whoever has joined us. Thank you for attending this webinar. This is part of the Citrix Ready technical webinar series, where we showcase how our partners have integrated to deliver valuable products, services, and solutions to common problems faced by our customers. Today's presentation, we will be covering our joint value proposition with NVIDIA. And so the speaker, we have Jared Covert. He is a graphics expert and is a technical product manager at NVIDIA. And myself, Sagnik Datta, I am the technical marketing lead at Citrix Ready. Next slide, please. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the question panel on the right-hand side, and we will take your questions at the end of the presentation in our Q&A session. And I wanted to start this conversation essentially with what we as a company solve for you. One of the core reasons why organizations come to us is to help improve their employee experience and productivity and simplifying IT management. And we address these at various levels with key partner collaboration and integration such as NVIDIA. Together, NVIDIA and Citrix deliver mobile workspaces that wow users of high-end graphics with highly responsive 2D and 3D applications. To give you some perspective of our partnerships, I have listed a list of firsts that together NVIDIA and Citrix achieved over the years, and I'm just limiting to a few here. Like going back to the 2006, where it all began, we successfully delivered the first GPU pass-through solutions to Boeing in a private release. Their files transfers would have taken hours to put the company's IP at risk. And Citrix and NVIDIA enhanced their technology offering and solved a problem that was never solved before. This project brought us to the market, and essentially over the years we applied the learnings over and again, and what was a complex problem to solve. And by 2009 we delivered the first in the market OpenGL graphic accelerated solution, what we know as the ZenDesktop HDX 3D Pro. We received good attraction once early successes with Vestas, ABB, Volvo, and other popular brands. Like in the next last slide, you'll see that, but the adoption was still, as costs was a barrier for many organizations, so the adoption was still low. And by 2011, we brought to market a more scalable solution. ZenServer 6.0 introduced the first direct GPU pass-through solution, through which the number of concurrent users supported in a single host quadrupled, thus lowering the cost per user easily by 4th. We continued to improve the bandwidth efficiency, leveraged H.264 based adaptive deep compression technology, improved the supportabilities of various workload types. And by the time we entered 2013, we released the first high performance GPU sharing technology for cost effective Windows Server RDS, or what is more commonly known as XenApp workload. And this was all possible through ZenServer Hypervisor, which was the first hypervisor to deliver NVIDIA grade vGPU. And 2014 went by polishing the diamond further, started to make life of IT admin easier. We introduced provisioning services, MCS and PVS, peripheral support like 3D mouse, specialty devices like 3D mouse for our high-end graphic users. New GPUs and vGPU profiles were created to help IT admins manage their different profile task workers, knowledge workers, and power users. And by 2015, we expanded the vGPU support to vSphere 6, which was the more popular hypervisor, and ZenDesktop once again became truly hypervisor agnostic solution, regardless of the type of workload you run. By now, we truly managed to deliver scalable and cost-effective graphic accelerated VMs to end users. The adoption peaked, high DPIs display became common, graphic accelerated VMs became a standard, and Windows 10 adoption further improved the choice of graphics, thus leading to more graphic accelerated use cases. And in ZenDesktop 7.16, we unified the delivery of standard update and HDX 3D Pro mode. So admin do not have to uninstall and install their VDA and update their machine catalog via the MCS PVS every time they want to switch from a standard to an HDX 3D Pro. And with the increase of graphic accelerated VMs, increase the number of graphic accelerated critical VMs in an organization, thus the need to live migrate running VMs became an essential. Now, live migrating virtual machines been around for years, but you have never been able to live migrate VMs with the GPU attached. vGPU XenMotion improves user experience and administrator flexibility, enabling productivity during unexpected maintenance, or by allowing admins to redistribute the graphic accelerated desktops to rebalance the host performance. So that's going to be the topic of today's webinar, graphic at how to live migrate VMs, running VMs. I will briefly talk to you through the Citrix Ready for those who aren't aware of the program. To introduce Citrix Ready, next slide please. We are an end-to-end technology program that showcases, recommends third-party products, solutions, and services that demonstrate compatibility with Citrix products. Customers can quickly and easily find solutions such as the NVIDIA and Citrix joint solutions that is available in the market and in the marketplace. So you can find more about us from the link below, citrix.com/ready. And if you want to know about our partnership, you can navigate to the second link from partner program /Citrix Ready. Now, please welcome our speaker, Jared Coward. Hi, Jared. I welcome you to this technical webinar series, and over to you.
Thanks, Sagnet. So for those of you, Sagnet and I were working on this presentation, and we had this idea that, wow, we've done a lot of amazing things together, Citrix and NVIDIA. We should put together a list of the things that we did first together. And I hadn't heard the entire list kind of thrown together in the chronological order, but if we could just give you almost a round of applause, that was amazing to hear the list of firsts that Citrix and NVIDIA have done. So I appreciate the hard work there. I know both teams are working on trying to get that together, but it's a lot bigger list and a lot of neat things that we put together. But kind of to today, kind of one of the most exciting things that has been released, is really getting into this motion stuff. So that's what we're going to focus on. Before we dive into it too much, I want to just kind of set the stage a little bit around, what NVIDIA is trying to accomplish here. And, really it's about virtualization for any workload. It's about graphics, right? So it's about NVIDIA's virtual GPU offers GPU acceleration from everything from graphics to compute. Over the next year or so, you're going to see a lot more of these compute type workloads kind of making their way into deployment. And that's really what our kind of mission statement is really, we believe that everybody within a desktop virtualization or application virtualization needs graphics. And so we want to make a cost affordable, effective method for that, thus enabling this vGPU functionality. And so super exciting stuff. If you don't know what and how this kind of lays out, this is kind of a brief architecture of kind of the platform, if you will. Across the top is the different types of workloads we see within the data center. We see a grid virtual PC, which is kind of your task and knowledge users. We see our Quadro virtual data center workstation users. Those are our higher end users. And those users typically are dealing with rendering, high performance computing, AI type deployments. And so those are the use cases we're trying to address within the solution stack. Within a hypervisor host, we have our vGPU monitoring, insight, and management stack. So these are things like we're plugging right into Director nowadays. We also have many third-party vendors that we have things plugged into as well, where now we can see the virtual GPU utilization. Is it being used appropriately? Is it sized appropriately? If you haven't seen some of those types of things, I know we've done some webinars on that as well, but those would be good ones to look up around that insight capability that we now have that's built right into the solution. The different hypervisors that we have here, multiple hypervisors that we support, doing everything from GPU sharing to multiple GPUs in a host. And then below the hypervisors, we've got the different board solutions that you can see there. So our Maxwell series M60, M6, M10. We now have Pascal series that is supported as well, and then we even are now supporting the Volta series cards. So basically, we're trying to get to day one support of every board that we would offer in the Tesla family being supported, and being able to have those offerings. So if you see here, this is kind of how this stacks up. If you need compute or CUDA, that falls into that Quadro, but everything else is falling into the Grid virtual PC there. So we just had a great release in March, and this was the release that added this migration capabilities. This is the Grid 6.0 release, and it really focused around four main parts here. So management capabilities were kind of the motion. We had a few monitoring type metrics that were added as well. We also increased and enhanced some of the virtual PC capabilities and had some enhancements there. We added some new hardware boards, and then we added some encoding type enhancements now, which is giving us the ability within Citrix to do things like H.265 and 444 type color now, which is fantastic for a lot of our customer users. So first, I want to jump into this management capability here, and what did we add that was significant specifically to the webinar? And that's really, we added XenMotion. So now with Zen Server, we've got XenMotion supported. The feedback has been fantastic. We had so many requests for early access that I think we weren't able to actually fulfill them all. But now you don't need early access. It's available and it's shipping. Not to leave VMware out completely, but VMware, we do have a form of kind of migration to where we have the ability now with vSphere to do suspend and resume. So what this means is we actually have to pause the VM, move it, and then restart it. So we don't lose any data, and we can get the VM from A to B, but we can't do that live like we can do with Zen Server and the Zen Desktop solution. And then we improve some, in the monitoring, we improve some of our encoding kind of statistics, which will make their way into a lot of our third-party monitoring metrics. But just to give you kind of an idea of the things that we're adding, we're working really hard in these releases to keep the solution feature-rich and getting feedback from our customers. We have a GPU community advisor program where we've got about 25 of Citrix CTPs and VMware vExperts that contribute and oftentimes help us give with feedback around what we need to be having in the product for the future. So let's kind of talk a little bit about GPU live migration, or GPU XenMotion, whatever we want to call it here, and why it's kind of so difficult. A lot of you have been asking for this. It's probably the #1 request for the last 5 years or so. But if we look here, this is kind of a simplified diagram, but hopefully it'll kind of get the point. When we're doing a CPU to CPU type migration, we may have 2 to 4 cores in a virtual machine. And we have to kind of sync the states between those and the memory that's in use. Let's transfer that over to the other host and then kind of change access, who's kind of owning that VMDK or that VHD, and then migrate that VM. When we're dealing with GPUs, not only do we have to do all that, but we also now have to take the massively parallel architecture of a GPU with potentially our newest generation chips or in the 5,000 cores. And we have to sync all that state, all that frame buffer over to the other virtual machine, find a place to put it, and migrate it. So it's not only the thousands of cores we have to sync the state of, but it's also the encode, decode engines, frame buffers, all these different things. And so there's a lot of work that was done to make this happen. So if you happen to see the Zen Desktop product management team or the Zen Server team or even the NVIDIA product management team at Synergy here next week, definitely give them a high five, because this is years in the making to make this happen. So why did we do it? And what's the value add for this? And really, it's a required feature. It's one of these things where people come up to me and they're like, yeah, we want to talk about, why migration and why is it so important and how do we make a cool demo out of it? And I'm like, well, it's just something that's kind of required. Everybody knows what migration is, and a lot of people have just expected it to be there. So it's really required by mission critical, system administrators and data centers. It's required so that we don't have to take users down. In the past, without this feature, in order for us to do maintenance on hosts, we would have to shut the virtual machine down, which oftentimes meant we had to communicate with the users. We would have to find out when we could take them down. Oftentimes now with the density we have, we can put up to and over 100 plus users on a host now with vGPU. And if you've got to schedule and coordinate 100 users to move them somewhere else and have to shut down their VMs, it's just a nightmare. So this now enables that and really increases productivity, reduces downtime, and just ultimately gives us a lot of capability. If you see here, we've got a couple of things, it's about maintenance, but it's not just about that, it's about optimizing our data center utilization. So being able to consolidate all of our users onto one host so that maybe we can free up a host for doing a compute machine learning type workload. Now we have that capability without having to orchestrate any communication with the end users. We can also consolidate profiles for better density, and it just gives us a lot of capabilities there in that regard. So this is kind of the big reason why we did this. So we had a few customers that were part of the tech preview, and they gave us a couple of quotes. This one's from Browning Day Mullins, and in a nutshell, it's a game changer, right? The Meltdown Spectre BIOS came out, and they were immediately able to make it a simple, update. So they were able to move machines around, apply the update, and able to get that without having to orchestrate these huge, complex shutdown, move, restart kind of maneuvers. We had, AWL here, healthy servers, happy users, that's giving them the ability, to really deal with a 24-hour-a-day environment, deal with short windows. They also were dealing with a Meltdown Spectre, and this gave them a way that they could migrate things around and get things patched without having to have downtime on their users. But really good feedback in regards to them now running in production. So what does it take to do this? So essentially our entire stack of Tesla boards are supported except, P100, V100, K1 and K2. So if you've got any of the Maxwell lineup or any of the Pascal lineup, minus the P100, all of those are supported. XenMotion currently supports Windows 7, Windows 10. We also can do our server operating systems, so like 2016, 2012, those also have the capability to be migrated if you were maybe having a GPU pass through to a XenApp host. I didn't put it in here, but VMware and their suspend and resume does support Linux. So if you were running a Linux graphics accelerated workload in VMware, you could suspend that and resume it with Linux. Linux not being supported within Xen server at this time, as you can see here. So suspend, resume with Linux. So here's just a quick kind of graph of what's supported, what versions. If you look here from a hypervisor perspective, Xen Server 7.4 is what is needed. Migration works, suspend, resume works, Windows 10 works, Linux not currently, but I'm confident that's in the works. And then on VMware, no live migration, but all of the other ones do work. So a couple of things that are important if you're going to implement this, and that's, always make sure your hosts are patched and up to date, not only from a security perspective, but oftentimes there's enhancements and things that get added here. So definitely make sure that all hosts are up to date. And the other big one is make sure that your hosts have identical patches. So seeing some challenges around this, but double check and make sure that all your hosts are up to version 7.4. They're patched up to the same level and in sync. Once they're in sync, then the next step is to make sure that your Xen server hosts are licensed. So this is a big one. Back in Xen server 6.0, I believe, or 6.1, there was a flip or a switch flipped that required the vGPU features functionality to be on a licensed server. So it needs to be either XenApp and desktop or a per socket, whatever license, but it needs to be licensed in order to see the vGPU functionality. So one of the symptoms of this is if you install the NVIDIA grid, the virtual GPU manager, and you go into your Xen Center and you see that there's a GPU tab there, but you don't see any of your profiles, double check your licensing. Ensure that your licensing status is green checkboxed and licensed. If you see a red X there, then that would be indicative of it not being licensed and would definitely be your problem there. So definitely make sure your Zen servers are licensed. So how do you enable this? There's a couple of ways. So I'll go with the hard way first, and then I'll talk about the easy way. But basically, to install the vGPU manager, you need to head out to NVIDIA website. There's a licensing portal. It's a gated site. So that gated site requires a login, and it requires your, you can either get an evaluation license or you can get a license key. And that license key will get you access to that portal, and that'll give you the ability to download the latest 6.0 virtual GPU manager for Zen Server 7.4. So once you down that, you can upload it to your server and run this command. So it's rpm-iv, and then you specify the path to the RPM package. Reboot the hosts, and you're good to go. There is one additional thing that needs to be set. In future releases, this won't be required. But in the etc modprobe.d, there's an NVIDIA.conf file, and you need to add this registry setting. So it's the rm enable vGPU migration equals 1 setting. So, and this is all in the admin guide, but I know there's a handful of people out there that don't read those because, hey, you're confident with it. But this gives you it. I did notice one challenge with this is, let's say you're connected to your Zen server host via like, WinSCP. And in that WinSCP, you just go to this etc modprobe.d and you open up the NVIDIA config file and you just add this in there. I noticed that that if writes aren't correct, that this won't work. So I recommend using from a command line, Nano or VI, and just doing it right there on the host instead of trying to pull it back into Windows and then upload the config file. I did see some problems there, so work out your command line skills and use Nano or VI. I found that was better. End result is once this is done on all your hosts, reboot them, and you will be in great shape. All right. Okay, so from a hardware update, what did we do with hardware with 6.0? Actually, let me jump back here real quick. So there is another method that we can use to enable XenMotion. And for those of you who don't know, if you've worked with Zen Server, if you've worked with VMware, and you've worked with NVIDIA, there is this command line method where we can upload the file and we can run the command line. But Citrix has got an easier way. If any of you have ever seen the option when you're installing Zen Server where it says, do you have an additional supplemental pack? Or if you are in Zen Center and you go to, install updates, install supplemental pack, there is an ISO file that is located in the downloads when you download the vGPU manager that you can just select apply this supplemental pack. And this supplemental pack will run through all of your prerequisites, it'll run through all your pre-checks, and it'll deploy the vGPU manager on every host that has a GPU for you. So it'll shut down VMs, it'll suspend VMs, it will reboot the host, it'll do it all for you. So really great feature with Zen Server that a lot of people don't realize, but definitely look at the supplemental pack install. It's just an ISO image, and it literally is like 3 clicks, and every host in your deployment will have the vGPU manager installed and ready to go. But I highly recommend using that method. Really, really simple. So in the VM itself, couple of caveats that I will mention here. So first is you need to assign your vGPU to the VM. So if you right click on the VM, you can assign a vGPU profile type to it, make sure that the driver is installed, and then that VM will be good to go. One of the other things that gets a lot of people is making sure that the virtual machine is licensed with the NVIDIA licensing solution. So like Citrix, there's a licensing server that needs to be installed, and you need to make sure that the NVIDIA vGPU is licensed. So definitely make sure that that's the case. To migrate it, it's as simple as you guys have already done. You right click on it, you migrate the VM wherever you want to migrate it. Select your host, and off you go. There is a moment of kind of pause where the VM will pause for just 1 second, very similar to XenMotion, and you'll have that one little click. Obviously, on the right-hand side here, you'll see larger vGPU profiles will take a longer time to migrate. If you're doing, you know, a P40 with a 12 gig profile, so 12 gigs of GPU frame buffer, and you've got, you know, 32 gigs of RAM assigned to that, you know, that VM could take quite some time. You know, some of the requirements or recommendations, I would put 10 gig networking not as recommended. I would put it as strongly recommended. You know, any of the migrations, you know, bigger networking, faster networking is important, and it makes for those things to be faster. If you're running shared storage or if shared storage is not used, migration can take a really, really long time. One of the features that was added to Zen Server a few 5 or 6 versions ago was storage migration. So storage migration in combination with a vGPU XenMotion is supported and works, but it just takes a while because you have to copy the entire VHD over to the other host. And if that's a 100 gig VHD, that all has to be copied, and then all the migration has to happen on top of that. So be warned that that can add to it. You know, shared storage is ultimately recommended. This can be, you know, NFS, iSCSI, Fiber Channel. We don't use Fiber Channel anymore. But all of those different solutions can be supported and should be for the fastest, absolutely, migration possible here. So from a kind of getting back to 6.0 here, what I want to do here is talk a little bit about kind of the hardware lineup. We added the V100. So if you follow NVIDIA and you know what we're doing, the V100 is our latest Volta supported board. So this works in its SXM and PCI format. And this is really for the highest end Quadro users. So we now have the ability to not only address, you know, our task users, our knowledge users, which we're seeing a lot more use cases for, especially with Windows 10 and the more, you know, graphically rich environments. But we're also seeing the highest of the high-end users wanting to virtualize more. And so we needed to bring to the grid solution the absolute highest end possible board. And so now with 6.0, we support the V100. So the V100 is just a beast of a board. And I'll show you here how this kind of lays out here. If you see here, I've tried to break this down into kind of markets, which makes sense here. And you see at the very high end, you know, a lot of the questions that I would get, you know, probably in the Q&A that I'm getting right now that I'm not seeing is, you know, what board for what user type, or, you know, I'm running this type of application, what should I be looking at in that regards? And if you're dealing with the highest end user, you're dealing with the P100, V100. You know, this is for, you know, high-end graphics performance. This is for, you know, double precision compute, which is a lot of high performance oil and gas type applications, really high memory bandwidth. This also is for like deep learning, machine learning, training, or data analytics, really high-end use cases. And then we have kind of more for our mid to high tier is the P40. So this is equivalent to kind of our P6000 class board. Large frame buffer, single precision compute. And then we get into kind of the everything else, which is just crazy because I think we were saying the M60, you know, a year and a half ago was our highest end board, and now we've got all these boards above it. But for the mid tier, you know, great graphics performance. This is Pascal feature set. If you look at the P4, this is kind of my secret favorite board right now. This thing's compatible with anything, and it's great for you know, inferencing or transcoding type features. And it's small, it's tiny, it's cheap, and it runs in a lot of different boards for that mid tier. And then you have the M60, which is 2 GPUs per board, great density. Good graphics performance. If we get into the grid virtual PC solution, this is kind of for everybody else. The M10 here, this has got 4 GPUs per board. So this is the board where we're actually able to get into the 32, 64 users per board. You add a couple of those boards to a host, and you know, you're getting in over 100 users. So this is the best price per user and the best density. One of the things over the last few years that we've added as well is blade support. So we've got the P6 and the M6 now. So a huge list of blade vendors now that if you're a blade customer, you now have the option to add those in there. And some of the density around the P6s in a lot of these blades is just fantastic. So the density is coming up there. But this is kind of the right GPU for your use case. If you're looking for what are your users kind of looking like, this is a great slide to screenshot because it kind of gives you a great idea of what board you should be looking at. And then there's some great resources at the end that can kind of get you a little bit more granular into the amount of density that you can see with some of those users. So here's the boards, just kind of form factor, what they look like. I've had this question a lot, is people are, kind of confused, specifically like XXM or SXM and MXM. What are these things? Everybody's pretty familiar with the top board there, where we get into the M10, M60, P40, P100, D100, the PCI slot, right? You guys may be gamers out there, and you might have a PCI board for that. So that's the typical kind of form factor that people are used to. We also have, half length, half height, which is that P4. That P4 is about the length of a pencil, and you can see it's half the height of a normal PCI, so it's tiny. If you kind of look and compare it between those two, it's a really small little board, but that card's very powerful. And then this is where we get into the SXM. So this is a form factor that was developed, years ago. And this is used, initially it was used in high performance computing, but it's starting to make its way from a form factor perspective into a lot of other solutions. So this is the P100, D100 now have that option to run on that SXM. Then we have the MXM, and this is what goes in blades. So a lot of people are used to the top PCI form factor as GPUs, and they're like, well, how do you get that into a blade? Well, we don't use that is the reason, and we use this MXM form factor. And that's what goes into blade solutions there, to give you kind of an idea. So density, how many of these boards can we get in servers? So these are all kind of caveated. It's all like your results. Definitely check the HCL. So there's a hardware compatibility list on NVIDIA's website. And it's not just these three vendors. There is hundreds of servers nowadays that are supported in regards to density here. But this gives you an idea of how many boards you can cram into a server. So you can see, we get into like the C240, the R720, we're getting 6 of those P40s or P4s. But the density, the amount of boards we can get in there is really mainstream now. There's almost every major vendor has got a significant lineup of server offerings that offer a broad range of different GPU solutions. So from a platform perspective, we listened to the customers. We added a significant amount of features into Virtual PC. So Virtual PC being kind of the entry-level solution. This is for your task and knowledge users again. What we did is a handful of features that came directly from feedback is we increased the profile size. So prior to 6.0, it was limited to a 1 gig profile. But what we're finding is more and more users, and this is direct from feedback from our NGCA members, this is feedback from customers, but what we're finding is a 2 gig frame buffer profile is becoming kind of the new normal, specifically for kind of knowledge users and even task users. Some of the reasons for that is, larger resolution, multiple monitors, and just overall more graphic productivity applications. So a lot of these users are needing a larger profile. So we've added in a 2 gig profile support for Virtual PC now. One of the other things that we had a lot of feedback, specifically from Citrix customers, was Linux. A lot more companies are moving towards a Linux VDI published. It might only have a browser or a handful of other things in it that they use for productivity, but Linux being something that is needed within Virtual PC now. So it's not necessarily always for developers, it's for anybody else, but Linux now is a supported platform within the Virtual PC. Prior to that, it was something that was only in the Quadro Virtual Data Center solution there. And the last thing that we added, directly feedback from a handful of very vocal customers, is support for up to 2K or 2 4K monitors, or up to 4 HT monitors now within the solution. So point being here is that now I think we can, within Virtual PC, we can handle any of the maximum amount of monitors that customers are having, and also the higher resolution that customers are having here. This is really about dealing with the knowledge user in healthcare. They're starting to get more higher resolution monitors, finance specifically higher resolution monitors, and multiple of them. And then software developers now being able to leverage Linux. So this was very well received, the features that now were added into that, but hopefully it's, if you've got any comments or feedback, definitely let me know. So a couple of things from a takeaway perspective. There's a NVIDIA Citrix test drive that everybody should be taking a look at. There's a request access to it, but if you want to try this stuff out, NVIDIA Citrix offer a test drive where you can go and actually play with it and see what's going on. So definitely take a look at that. So one of the things I want to kind of leave you guys with here is that NVIDIA GPUs are everywhere now. So it's 140 servers from more than 30 different vendors. From a hypervisor perspective, it's not just Citrix and VMware. We've now added support for Nutanix, and so the Citrix and desktop solution with a vGPU running on AHV now is also supported. So in the hyper-converged space, there's a lot of things happening there that are really exciting. Basically, all the major industry standard servers are supported. All of the Blade server vendors are now supported. A good chunk of all of the hyper-converged infrastructure is supported. And one of the biggest things that we're seeing, especially with Workspace Cloud and some of the up-and-coming things that Citrix has been offering around, run your Director and Studio in the cloud, and then have a hybrid deployment where we might have some on-prem, some in the cloud, is needing of more GPUs in the cloud so that they can take advantage of that. And so now there's Oracle, there's Azure, AWS, Google Cloud. All of those solutions have the GPUs that you're seeing now offered in those in the cloud, being able to, right within the Workspace Cloud, be able to consume that and run your desktops there if needed. So a lot of great things and exciting things there. So from a resources perspective, I've got some case studies that we can provide links to. If you're a partner, we've got access to some things here. And then from a video webinars, I've got all these recorded kind of webinars that talk about different use cases. So not necessarily just the high-end SolidWorks, Adobe type solutions. I've got some really great stuff around, virtual PC, Windows 10, and why it's important. That's one of the things that we're seeing is that Windows 10 is just a fantastic experience with the GPU. And I've got some webinars that either I've done or some other members of the team have done that are useful. We also have some white papers that I would encourage you guys to take a look at. These are great things to be able to, show decision makers within organizations of, why this is important. Depending upon your industry, we're working really hard with Citrix Ready on creating, brochures and things around specific industries that kind of explain that. And then, all kinds of other neat things that should be there. So from a feature perspective, I'll kind of leave you here as this kind of breaks down into, the feature set of the different solutions. But you can see here all the different things that are supported. I was on a call yesterday and somebody was asking me, hey, if I buy virtual PC and I also want to run Zen app with my Zen desktop solution, is that supported? Do I need to buy a virtual PC and a V app solution? The answer is no. So you can see there that if you do have, Quadro VDWS or Grid Virtual PC, that all of your application publishing is included as well. ISV certifications and all of the different things that are there now. So here's some resources that I'll leave you with. These are everything from the nvidia.com/try vGPU. So you can go to that test drive. These are things from our website dedicated to this, where there's great things. There's a YouTube channel where you can see different demos as well. And then if you are active on the forum community, take a look at our grid forums at nvidia.com. And then follow us on Twitter, please. My Twitter handle is at ZenJCC. I'll leave you with this. There's a gentleman by the name of Ramos that wrote a fantastic blog yesterday. So if you follow me on Twitter at ZenJCC, I retweeted and posted this yesterday, and it is everything you're seeing in this presentation times 10 in regards to details. So screenshots, how to upgrade your licensing server, caveats, gotchas, and that is a great resource if you're looking to deploy this. But on Twitter, I posted that yesterday, and you can take a look at that. That's all the question or all the content I had for today. We'll keep it kind of short and sweet. I think it gives us about 15 minutes or so for Q&A. I'm not looking at the questions, so maybe one of you other gentlemen that are looking at the questions can throw any of them out that came up.
Hey, Jared. Yeah, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. So I'll just quickly run through the question and answers, and I think a couple of them have joined late, so maybe this will be a repeat. So if you could kindly revisit these questions. So the first question is, when will it be available? It's available already. So that should be what version of code base do I need?
Yeah, so this is available already. We've done a couple of things around this where it was in tech preview. Tech preview is over, so this is production ready, available from requiring the next question I think you were asking was what versions. So it needs Zen Server 7.4. If you're doing VMware Suspend Resume, that is 6.7, which was released a few weeks ago. So it needs one of those two versions, and then it is the NVIDIA Grid 6.0 software for your corresponding hypervisor.
Great, and the boards that are supported, can you revisit that?
Yeah, so I kind of go the other way. If you saw my presentation, I go the other way because we kind of classified as everything is supported except the Grid K1, K2 boards. So those are some boards that were end of life about 2.5 years ago. Those are not supported. And then the newer V100, P100, those are not supported at this time. It's a little bit different architecture with those boards, so there's still some ongoing development to add support for those, but at this time, those are not supported with the 6.0 release.
Perfect. There's another question about the pricing. We can't discuss pricing, but Jared, so they're asking about per concurrent licensing and so forth.
So from a pricing perspective, there's a couple of ways to answer this. Of course, reach out to your partners, your OEMs. So a lot of the OEMs now can sell not only the Citrix licensing, but they can sell the server, the boards, the NVIDIA licensing, all kind of in one bill of material. So that's really great, as we've worked with all those vendors to be able to do that. We also have what are called NPM partners that have the ability to get pricing for you as well. What I can say about pricing, because it's different with every OEM, I can say about pricing is we've broken the pricing of virtual PC down to kind of a period of 3 years, saying, all right, what is going to be my cost per user over 3 years? And if you were to take the cost of the hardware, the cost of the licensing, the cost of your kind of software update, maintenance, it averages out to be $6 a month per user. So it's $6 a month for your users to have graphics added to those deployments is kind of the simplified way to pricing.
Perfect. And another question is, I'll be at Synergy. Is there a chance to connect with you?
Absolutely. So I'll be at Synergy next week. Looking forward to it. I've got 5 or 6 different speaking engagement, either events or in booths or Citrix Ready team. And our booth, I believe, is booth 301. I will be in and out of the booth often, so definitely come by, say hi to me. And I think the Citrix Ready booth, I'll spend some time in the Citrix Ready booth as well. And I think that booth is booth 103?
102.
Yeah, that's 102. So 102 is the Citrix booth. So between one of those two booths is where I'll be spending the majority of my time. But we would love to see you. Definitely stop by and see me. Follow me on Twitter, and I kind of post if I'm speaking somewhere or something's going on. And I'd love to have you come say hi.
Yep. So that's from May 8th to 10th. For those who don't know the Synergy dates, so at Solution Expo Anaheim Convention Center, NVIDIA booth is at 301, and the Citrix Ready booth is at 102. We look forward to meet you in person. Hey Jared, so that's it from the question side. There is some more question about the the slide deck. So, and the recording, yes, we will be sharing the recording in 1 or 2 business days to your registered email ID. Yes, so that, I think that should be that's the end of today's webinar. I want to take a moment and thank Jared and the NVIDIA team for working in the background to make this webinar successful and sharing their knowledge with us. And last but not the least, I want to thank you, each one of you who are attending our webinar today in Citrix Study Technical Webinar Series. And this shall conclude our broadcast. Thank you. Thank you so much.